A strange and mysterious event took place in the Pacific Ocean in 1972. A clean energy research vessel called the SIG vanished without a trace. What makes this case even stranger is that the ship reappeared in almost the exact same location 50 years later, but it was completely untouched by time. How could an entire ship simply vanish into thin air? And what could have possibly caused it to reappear half a century later in almost perfect condition? These are the unsettling details of the Divine Wind ship and the Undersea Time Gate. On January 16, 1972, the SIG left Honolulu Harbor in Hawaii. The ship was equipped with state-of-the-art technology to study ocean waves and collect data on clean energy resources. There were 18 people on board the vessel, including scientists, engineers, and crew members. But just 3 days later, the ship vanished without a trace. The last known position of the SIG was near Johnston Atoll, which is part of the Indian Ocean, halfway between Hawaii and Kiribati. But when the United States Coast Guard arrived at the scene, there was no sign of the ship or its crew. Despite an extensive search and rescue operation, the vessel was never found, and the crew was never seen again. It wasn't until 50 years later that the mystery of the sign would be solved. On February 22, 2022, a group of researchers from the Naval Research Laboratory were conducting an underwater survey near Johnston Atoll. That's when they discovered the long-lost vessel. The ship was in remarkably good condition, considering it had been missing for 50 years. It was covered in marine life, but other than that, it appeared to be in almost perfect condition. And it wasn't just the ship that was found, but also the crew. When the researchers opened the hatch of the ship, they found the crew still on board. At first, they assumed that they had somehow been preserved in a time capsule like the crew of the Titanic. But that wasn't the case. The crew insisted that they had only been gone for a few hours. One of the crew members even checked his watch and it only read 3:17 p.m., which would have been the afternoon of January. So how could the crew have been missing for 50 years if they only felt like they had been gone for a few hours? According to one of the scientists on board the ship, they were dragged under the water by a light vortex. When they resurfaced, they found themselves 50 years in the future. But there's more to the story. When the researchers inspected the ship's instruments, they found something incredible. The ship's chronometer, which is a device used to measure time, showed that it was still on January 1972. In addition to that, the ship's radio equipment was still broadcasting the ship's last known coordinates, which were hundreds of miles away from where it was actually located. All of this evidence suggests that the ship may have traveled through some kind of time gate or wormhole, which would explain why it disappeared and then reappeared 50 years later. But why did the crew not age, and why were they still on board the ship after all this time? Some believe that the crew may have entered a state of suspended animation, which is a state in which the body's vital functions are slowed down to extremely low levels. This could explain why they didn't age, and why they were still on the ship after all this time. However, this is just a theory, and there is no concrete evidence to support it. Another possibility is that the crew may have been transported to an alternate dimension where time is not linear. This could explain why they only felt like they had been gone for a few hours, and why the ship's instruments were still showing the year, 1972. However, this is also just a theory, and there is no way to prove it. What do you think really happened to the Divine Wind ship and its crew? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe if you haven't already. Thanks for watching.